the ever-growing foster care crisis in the United States. Not by a show of hands, but I want you guys to take a second to think about any interaction that you may have had with a foster child or with the foster care system. While many of you have probably never had any type of interaction, maybe some of you were a foster child or housed a foster child or knew someone when you were growing up. On any given day in America, there are 443,000 children in the foster care system in America. According to Adopt US Kids, the average age of a child in the foster care system is 8 years old, and right now there are more boys than girls, and those are just some fast facts. There are many stigmas that surround the foster care system, the types of children who end up in foster care, their families, the social workers, and so on. But it is time that we end those stigmas. But what's the most important part? It is paramount that people begin to become informed about the foster care system, because too often people don't know enough about it, and that's why change does not happen. So today I will be discussing the history and the statistics of the foster care system. I will be talking about the life of a child in the system, and most of all, I will be talking about social change that is severely needed to change the life of a child in this system. But first, I'm going to be talking about my own personal story. When I was 11 years old, I was placed into foster care and I was completely displaced from my home. While I was told that within a few days I might be able to return to my family, that was not the case. You may have heard of kids being moved house to house, but in my case, I actually stayed in the same home for 8 years. I consider this a lucky situation, but there were many ups and downs to my case. About a year and a half in, visitation with my family stopped, and that connection was completely lost, and I still have not gained that back to this day. There wasn't very much support from the actual system. If you've heard about it, there are workers called CASA workers, and they are advocates for children in the foster care system. However, there are not enough of them. You may have heard the saying, the need is great, but the help is small. That is the case with most systems in the foster care program. The CASA workers are typically advocates for all children, except that especially in our area, there are only enough advocates for children who are with special needs or for infants. So I was never given that. While my dreams of a future were completely reached and gained because of being in the foster care system, there were many things in my home that I lacked that I personally consider more important to a foster child. My home lacked a lot of love and support in a parental setting, and I lacked emotional, psychological, and a lot of trust in my home. But because I was not the typical student or the typical child that you'd see in the foster care system, I was asked on many occasions to speak on the behalf of the foster care system. That was at fundraising events or different benefit dinners, and I was essentially asked to praise the system that had changed my life forever. And while I said that my situation was kind of lucky, it's definitely not the norm. The life of a foster child can mean many things. The demographics break down like this. Even though the system started around the 1800s and there was close to 30,000 kids who were displaced by homelessness and neglect in their homes, right now the number has skyrocketed. There are over 400,000 children in the foster care system, and the average child spends about 2 years in the system. At least half of all of these children live in non-relative homes, and about 13% of them, as of 2017, lived in group homes or institutions. And if you've heard of a group home or what they are for, it's usually for children with behavioral or emotional issues. However, this isn't always the case, and a lot of them are very packed with kids. And this can lead to a whole list of future events. 56% of children in the foster care system actually have a case goal of reunification with their family. However, the reunification process can take over a year. So that's a child being in a foreign home for over a year before they are able to go home permanently. Many move home to home while they're in the system, and many also go social worker to social worker, and there's a reason behind that. Many issues develop for these kids, including psychological, emotional, and trust issues, and a lot of them fear what comes next. For many of these children, that means that there is a decreased chance of graduating from high school, less likely to find employment, to go for secondary education, and of the 20,000 youth that age out of the system every year, 17,000 of them are left without permanent families, and approximately 20% of them will be instantly homeless. Those kids age out at the age of 18 or 21, depending on the state that you live in, and those are just some of the terrifying facts. For those who are fortunate enough to be adopted, the system can also take a long time. Children sit waiting for over a year. Approximately 100,000 kids are waiting to be adopted right now. Of those 100,000 kids who are waiting, the ones who are younger than 8 years old have a likelihood of being adopted because parents want younger kids. But for those over the age of 9 years old, that chance rapidly declines. This is why there are so many older kids in the foster care system, and for a certain percentage of them, they're in the system for close to 5 or more years. On top of that, the adoption process is extremely strenuous, and that is what leads a lot of people to not want to adopt. Either there's not enough information, or it just takes a long amount of time. So with all that being said, obviously there's a growing crisis in the United States. Numbers have risen significantly, especially in the last 2 decades. So what needs to happen? First of all, there need to be more foster homes in the United States. Now, I'm not asking everybody to become a foster parent as soon as you possibly can, because that's just not the reality of it. However, there needs to be a better system for choosing foster parents, because there's not a good enough system. A lot of the foster parents who actually get qualified to do so should not be foster parents and are there more so for the benefits, and those benefits are small. There need to be better benefits so that people can actually do what they want to do and actually help these kids. There need to be more benefits for social workers. A lot of the social workers, especially the ones who are very good at their jobs, end up moving up and getting better positions. And in areas especially like Tulare County and Fresno County and just all over the valley, it is difficult to pass up a job like that because you need the money and you're not making enough money and there aren't enough benefits just being a social worker. So that leaves the people who are not as great at their job to take care of hundreds of cases sometimes. So how can you make a personal connection with these kids? And most of all, there needs to be policy change. While a lot of you might not know what's going on right now, I can tell you that at least in Fresno, there's a committee known as the Foster Care Oversight, which works to connect the Board of Supervisors, the Department of Social Services, and other committees in the area to bring change and to ensure that there will be more effective and efficient changes and positive outcomes for these children. Along with that, there are many other things. Obviously, you can donate to different organizations that are collecting clothes and blankets and different things like that for children, but ultimately it's about getting out there, voting for the policy change that would help this, and talking to people who actually have the power to change things. Thank you.